I've always liked looking at films with multiple versions, be them director's cuts versus extended cuts versus TV versus film versions, English versions versus their original counterparts. I mean, to list a few examples, we got Dawn of the Dead, Das Boot, Blade Runner, Touch of Evil, even The Alamo, directed by John Wayne. And these are some of my personal choices for films other than, kaiju flicks, because kaiju flicks from the 1950s and 60s are probably some of the most fascinating to actually look at. That being said, I've also done this with Godzilla 2000. You can also check that video out as well, that podcast, looking at the different versions of that as well. I've said this in other videos, but it does make me sad to see that the US versions of these films, these kaiju films, these Godzilla movies and such, are going away, now that Toho basically owns them outright. And these are the versions I grew up with. And they are the ones that made me a kaiju fan, for good and for bad. And while it's rare for me to find a US cut I prefer over the original, I think in at least comparing and contrasting the two versions is something both editors, writers, and producers, and directors such as myself, should really take interest in. And, for example, me making my fan edit of Ghidra the Three-Headed Monster really taught me the importance of structure, literally taking that movie apart scene by scene, and in some cases shot by shot, looking where sound effects came in, or where a reaction shot cuts to, or doing this not only made me realize I prefer the US cut to Ghidra the Three-Headed Monster, but gave me a whole new appreciation for the US cuts of these flicks in general. But this isn't about Ghidra the Three-Headed Monster. I'm here to chat about Rodan, because, quite frankly, both versions are basically the same film. It's not like Gigantus the Fire Monster, where they bastardized the original film from the ground up. I give the King brothers credits that they liked what they saw enough, and they kept 90% of the movie identical to its Japanese original version. Rodan is an excellent movie, all the way around. Everything from its story, the acting, the monsters, you name it. Rodan has it all. Is it Godzilla, the original? No. But nevertheless, an excellent film showcasing the talents of everyone involved at Toho. And it's important to note that Rodan is what really set the precedent for Toho being the company to make special effects heavy films. Not Godzilla, but something that will jump out to an audience member immediately is sound. Like many films from Japan in general, Rodan is an extremely quiet movie in its first act. Some of this is due to their lack of time and technology to do a great mixing job, but also a direct decision made by Honda and his editors. Rodan's first act is presented much like a horror movie, if anything else. Who's the killer? There's blood and gore, mild, but compared to other Honda films, this is as bloody as it gets. And this silence helps sets a mood of uneasiness, and only when the Meganulon show up is there actually any music. And when the music plays, it's probably Ifukube's darkest and most brooding score, probably the darkest he's ever written. Jump over to the American cut, and you'll find its first glaring flaw: the addition of a narrator. Now, a lot of US versions of Japanese films did this for some odd reason. Perhaps this is a lot because of the success of Godzilla, King of the Monsters, rearranging that film to be something in line of more like a classic noir film. But I honestly doubt that. But the noir aspect is true, but not because of Godzilla, King of the Monsters. A lot of classic science fiction films are actually structured based off of noir. Look at the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers. What you quickly discover with the addition of Shigeru as a narrator is a film much more focused on him as a protagonist, while the Japanese film is more of a collection of characters being thrust into a mystery where things just seem to get worse and worse and worse. Now, on the surface, I'd say that's a good thing. Having a character to focus on is often considered one element to make your stories more driven and concise. But that narrator... Two scenes come to mind where the narrator ruins the eeriness and atmosphere of the scenes. One is when Shigeru regains his memory and leads everyone to where they found Rodan's egg, and the other is when the Rodans are dying, so basically the end of the film. To focus on the ending sequence, I respect the US editors keeping Ifukube's score here. It's a wonderful piece we'll see him use again for Godzilla's own death in Godzilla vs. Destroya in 1995, also Ifukube's final score. But while Shigeru's narration drives home the original point of the film, we already get it. Show, don't tell. And hearing the Rodan scream in agony is enough to punch home what we are seeing. The US cut also features a lot of stock music, where there is either no music in the Japanese version, or to replace Ifukube's military marches. Now that's interesting that they would replace Ifukube's military marches. Some of this is because of natural edits to the film. No doubt Toho didn't provide them with copies of Ifukube's scores, so taking a shot out and rearranging it results in music falling out of sync. But that's a minor point and a piss-poor excuse. Many of Ifukube's stylistic and instantly recognizable military marches have been removed before and after this in American versions. Look at Battle in Outer Space, Rodan, of course, War of the Gargantuas, Monster Zero, and I've never quite gotten why. Perhaps they sounded too militaristic? Perhaps too Japanese? I do remember one time my father instantly asking me if this was Japanese music when I was listening to one of Ifukube's marches. And that wasn't even used in one of his films. In fact, it was an old march he wrote in 1943. Yet my father was able to quickly pick up that it was indeed Japanese. So perhaps that was the reason why. But there is one decision I stand with the US cut that I adore, which required the removal of Ifukube's score, and that is actually the attack sequence. Many US cuts often add sound effects to make the monster fights or destructions seem bigger. Like in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, they added Godzilla and Rodan roaring more to fill in some of that awkward pieces of silence, particularly when the assassins are trying to go after the princess and Shindo. They added in Godzilla's roar in there to make it sound like, oh yeah, there's a battle going on over there. While in the Japanese version, it seems like completely separate. The King brothers did the same thing with Rodan, adding more roars, rearranging his screams, adding the sounds of screaming civilians, etc., etc., etc. My favorite is actually having the soldier hanging on the tree and screaming bloody murder as he is blown away. They also replaced the Japanese sound effects for the rockets and tanks, these ones being far louder and far more brash, truly filling your ears. To put it politely, the US cut turns Rodan's rampage into a cacophony of sound that immerses me more as a viewer than the quieter Japanese counterpart. The Japanese version has a much softer sound track, and I mean that literally. Rodan roars less, there's no screaming. This is where Ifukube's music came in to fill in some of that silence. And to be clear, I am not saying Ifukube's score is bad for this scene. Far from it. Get Rodan is an awesome track, and I remember smiling the first time I ever watched the Japanese version when I heard that. I remember it put a smile on my face, and it was awesome. And the track that plays when Rodan tries to fly again is horrific, to say the least. Those low, bassy horns, those shrieking violins, mixed with the reactions of those watching in horror, it really is amazing. My favorite one being when the second Rodan arrives, flies over the camera, and the roar is just barely audible. All you can hear is its flying whistle, the winds, the guns, the buildings toppling over. They're all so loud they mute even the monster roaring. But the US version forgoes this. Just have the monsters themselves be the horror. And I actually like that because they didn't just take out Ifukube's music, they added all those new sound effects to actually back up the actual sound track. But music and sound effects, that's just a small chunk. Because I think the entire attack sequence from when Rodan makes his first true appearance when they fly away is also superior in the US cut. One reason is what I mentioned above, the fact that, they rearranged some stuff and they added in more sound effects. But here are the other two. Introducing Rodan's mate earlier, and the new cutting. Let's start off with cutting, because it's more technical. The Japanese version has it where only one Rodan jumps out of the cavern. The US version simply rearranges the shots, flips a couple here and there, and tricked us into thinking one Rodan was actually two, introducing Rodan's mate first, and earlier in the film. Like Shigeru screaming in the US version, it has a mate. It's just a previous shot flipped. You barely notice it without having seen the film billions of times. The second Rodan flying away is just the first Rodan, but flipped. In the same token, removing some of the shots of the first Rodan flying over the city lets US editors move those shots to later in the film, making the second Rodan's appearance have more weight. So when it is really the first Rodan destroying the city, the movie, the US cut, makes it out to be the second one. Making it so the JASDF, the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force, is already scrambled allows the editors to take a shot from previous in the film when the first pilot was killed, when he first encounters Rodan, take that same exact shot, move it later in the sequence to right there, and have us not even notice it. And it also splits the action up to also allow us to think that when one Rodan is, when the Rodans are really one, they're actually two. It's clever editing. The same goes for when Rodan actually lands. You take those shots, you flip them here and there, perhaps push in a bit on a shot, and bam, you got more footage than previously, giving the editor more room to cut and create utter chaos, and boy, did they succeed at that. And it's not like anything is being cut out per se. All the US cut is doing with the footage is splitting what were longer shots, then cutting to another shot, then cutting back to the previous footage, creating a longer action scene. But because there are more cuts, and the sound effects are so loud and bombastic, it's more energetic and frantic, adding to the chaos of the destruction. The downside is what they did, it drastically fades the quality of the footage itself, so even if the US cut was to get a true restoration like the beautiful Japanese one did, it'd be grainier no matter what. And that's just a side effect of what the King brothers did when rearranging the edit. How about the significance of revealing the second Rodan, now that we've talked about some of the edits? I mean, in the Japanese one, it's a twist in a movie full of big twists. I mean, first we think the Meganuda are the big threat, only to find out that Rodan is the bigger the threat, only to find out that there isn't just one, but there is another Rodan that's an even bigger threat. You know, the twists just keep piling up. And I've even read many reviews saying that the punch is greater in the Japanese version, seeing that second Rodan show up literally out of nowhere. But I actually disagree with that on a thematic standpoint. The theme in Rodan has always been about love conquering all and such. You know, things like that. And you want to know more, you can listen to my episode of Ishiro Honda-Thon on the subject. But part of that theme stems from one Rodan refusing to live without the other. While in the Japanese version, that stance is certainly prevalent, and both Honda and others have confirmed it as such. The lack of screen time with both of these Rodans sort of tampers that notion. So, having the second Rodan already being there with the first, I think only strengthens Takashi Kimura and Ishiro Honda's themes. They were already together, hiding and waiting, and now provoked. They get separated when attacked, and when the first Rodan gets in more trouble on the ground, the second one is quick to respond and come back for it, and thus making the end all the more tragic. One cannot live without the other. When one is in pain, the other rushes to its side. While one is dying in agony, the other refuses to save itself simply because it doesn't want to leave its mate. In the Japanese version, we see that twice, when the second Rodan comes to rescue the first one, and then finally at the very end. While in the American version, 3 times the charm. You see it 3 times. Once at the very beginning, you know, when Rodan makes his first appearance, true appearance, then when the mate comes to rescue it on the ground, and then finally at the end. But again, if you want more on this and the themes in Rodan, which are quite... I actually, one of the reasons why this movie really stands out above the other kaiju films of its kind, I did this as a part of a Ishiro Honda-Thon on the whole film, and I would actually listen to that. The link is in the description below, plug. Everything else when comparing the Japanese version and the US version of Rodan, you know, they're all just minor changes here and there, like moving a reverse shot here or there to cover up a continuity mistake. But I'd like to point out that the most noticeable ones that actually benefit the King Brothers cut, because there are some great edits in it. The first one I really liked played up on the horror aspect. The editing is basically the same. You know, the shots are the same length and everything like that. The matching shots are the same, even if Akube's music is used in both versions. And this is the scene where the 3 men are searching for Goro in the mine. when they are slaughtered. The Japanese cut has the remaining survivor call for help, and he falls as a looming shadow covers him. Then it hard cuts to all three bodies being brought into an examination room. Now that's pretty horrifying, and the quiet use of sound effects benefits the scene. Then comes the US cut, which has that last survivor howl, this blood-curdling scream, and the shot fades to black. Oh my god, what happened? And then it fades back in, and the doctors are examining the three bodies. Now that is much more horrifying than the Japanese version, and it certainly scared me as a kid. The other one is actually Rodan's birth, where it's sort of a mixed bag because I really do truly love both sequences, and I think both have their pros and cons. But the King brothers adds this loud howl as Rodan's egg cracks open, and when Rodan pops out, it roars. And that roar transcends into that dramatic push-in, that typical Ishiro Honda push-in, on Shigeru's face, and the music fades out for a moment. And all we have is Shigeru's reaction, and his reaction is our reaction. And while I think Rodan roars too much in the King brothers cut there, just having Rodan roar when the egg first cracks open, oh my god, it's powerful. Sound, it just sends chills down my spine every time I watch that. The same can be said for even the opening credits. They are basically the same, they just changed which roar they played over the opening credits. The King brothers use Rodan's most horrifying roar in my opinion, and also my favorite. And from that roar, Ifukube's brooding music swells in. It's true horror right there. Well, the Japanese cut followed the tradition of Godzilla and Godzilla Raids Again by having the roar over the title screen, but already having the music play under it. So to wrap this up, the US cut of Rodan has a lot of merits over the Japanese version, and is fascinating to watch side by side. I've always loved doing this with different versions of films, and Rodan's is truly one of my favorite examples. And in the least, I hope this cleared some things up for everyone. You know, it saddens me to have seen Wikipedia take a lot of the changes sections out and removed it, so we don't know them. And hopefully this can clear some of the stuff up. And hopefully I'd like to do this with some of the other films as well. It also makes me sad that the King brothers versions has not been restored to HD, and it's looking like it simply won't be. And it's not like it can be done easily with a fan restoration, because some of the additional footage added to it, like the JASDF, you know, taking off and stuff like that, that's not in the Japanese version. We don't know where those sources came from. But this goes to show that the Japanese versions, though usually superior, and yes, I think the Japanese version of Rodan is superior to the US cut, it shows that they aren't the only versions out there, and that the US cuts have more merits than we tend to remember. And I say give the American version a watch again. You actually might be surprised. Go on Facebook, like AN Productions for all up-to-date information of what we're doing. Follow AN Productions. Follow our website and everything like that. Links for everything are in the description below. And in the end, this is Adam Noyce of AN Productions saying, sayonara.